The great chamber of the galactic. Conquered stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, its walls curved upward, like the inside of an egg covered in floating platforms where representatives from thousands of species sat and watched and judged. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, adjusting itself to suit the visual needs of creatures who saw in ultraviolet, infrared, or spectrums that had no human name. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the central podium, a tiny figure in the vastness of the chamber. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of difficult decisions made in difficult times. She wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, unadorned except for a small pin showing Earth rising over a lunar horizon. Around her, the representatives of 4,000 spacefaring civilizations waited. Some were humanoid, most were not. There were beings of crystal and beings of gas. There were creatures with too many eyes and creatures with no eyes at all. There were hive minds speaking through biological puppets and ancient artificial intelligences housed in bodies of living metal. All of them looked down at the human with expressions ranging from boredom to contempt. The Velari representative sat in a position of honor near the front. His species resembled praying mantises, grown to 7 ft tall, with iridescent green carapaces and blade-like arms that could cut through steel. His compound eyes reflected Elena's image 1,000 times over, and his mandibles clicked in a pattern that his translation device rendered as soft, mocking laughter. The representative from Earth may speak, announced the conquered speaker, a being of pure energy contained in a magnetic bottle. Elena took a breath. She had given hundreds of speeches in this chamber over her 30 years of service. This one might be the most important. Honored representatives, she began, her voice calm and measured. 3 standard weeks ago, the cargo vessel Meridian's Hope was traveling through neutral space on a routine supply run to our colony on New Helsinki. The ship carried 800 crew members, 1,200 passengers, including 400 children, and enough supplies to support the colony through its winter season. She paused, letting the numbers settle. The Meridian's Hope was destroyed by weapons fire from a Velari patrol squadron. There were no survivors. The Velari Dominion has claimed this was an accident, a case of mistaken identity. They have offered their regrets and a small financial compensation. The Velari representative's mandibles clicked again. The matter is settled, he said, his translated voice carrying a tone of dismissal. Accidents happen in space. Your vessel was in a region where our forces were conducting military exercises. It should not have been there. The Meridian's Hope was traveling through neutral space. Elena repeated. Space that belongs to no one. Space where your forces had no legal right to conduct military exercises, and this is not the first such accident. She gestured, and holographic displays appeared around her showing data that every representative had already seen. In the past 10 years, there have been 47 incidents involving forces and human vessels. 32 of these resulted in human deaths. Total casualties exceed 12,000. The Velari Dominion has claimed accident or mistaken identity in every single case because they were accidents. The Velari representative said, humans are newcomers to space. Your vessels look similar to the ships of several species we are currently in conflict with. If Your people insist on traveling through dangerous regions. Some losses are inevitable. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Her expression did not change. This body exists to maintain peace in the galaxy, she said, turning to address the wider assembly. We joined the Conquered 200 years ago because we believed in that mission. We have followed every rule. We have paid every tax. We have contributed to every peacekeeping operation. We have done everything that was asked of us. She turned back to the Velari representative. And in return, we have watched our people die again and again. We have filed complaints and been ignored. We have requested investigations and been denied. We have asked for justice and received only excuses. Theory's compound eyes glittered. Perhaps, he said slowly, that is because this body recognizes the natural order of things. Some species are strong, some species are weak. The strong do not answer to the weak. This has always been the way of the galaxy. A murmur of agreement rippled through sections of the chamber. Not all species agreed with the Velari, but many did. The galaxy was not a kind place, and those who had clawed their way to power saw no reason to extend courtesy to those who had not. Elena nodded slowly, as if she had expected this response. I see, she said. Then let me be clear about humanity's position. She straightened her shoulders and something in her posture changed. The diplomatic softness fell away, replaced by something harder, something older. We do not want war, she said. We have never wanted war. Everything humanity has done since joining this Conquered has been aimed at avoiding conflict. We have kept our fleet small. We have kept our weapons limited. We have kept our colonies few and far from the territories of aggressive species. She paused. We have done this not because we are weak. We have done this because we choose to be restrained. The Velari representative made a sound that his translator rendered as harsh laughter. Restrained, you call it restraint. We call it inability. Your species has 47 colonies. The Dominion has 47,000. Your fleet numbers perhaps 300 vessels. Ours numbers 3 million. You speak of choice, but we see only a species that has reached the limits of its capabilities. You see what we have allowed you to see. Elena said quietly. For just a moment, something flickered in the Velari's compound eyes. Not fear, not yet, but perhaps the first distant cousin of uncertainty. We are asking one final time. Elena continued, cease these provocations. Stop killing our people. Allow us to exist in peace. This is not a demand. It is a request, a polite request from a species that still hopes for a peaceful resolution. And if we refuse, the Velari asked, what then, little human? Will you file another complaint, write another letter? Your restraint, as you call it, looks very much like helplessness from where I sit. Elena looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, almost gentle. If you refuse, she said, then we will stop being restrained and you will learn why we chose restraint in the first place. The chamber erupted in laughter, thousands of species mocking the tiny human who dared to threaten one of the galaxy's great powers. The Velari representatives' mandibles clicked in rhythmic amusement, and even some of the more neutral species joined in the derision. Elena waited for the laughter to die down. Her expression never changed. This is not a threat, she said when the chamber was Quiet again, humanity does not make threats. This is a warning, a courtesy, extended to this body and to the Velari. Dominion specifically, we are telling you clearly and openly that we have been holding back. We are asking you clearly and openly to not force us to stop holding back. Your warning is noted. The Velari representative said, his voice dripping with contempt, and dismissed. The Dominion does not take orders from prey species. If you wish to survive in this galaxy, you will learn to accept your place in it. Alina gathered her materials. The speech was over. She had said what she came to say. Very well, she said, let the record show that humanity warned the galactic conquered. Let the record show that our warning was ignored. Whatever happens next, remember that we tried very hard to avoid it. She stepped down from the podium and walked toward the exit. The laughter followed her, echoing in the vast chamber. In the observation gallery above, a being watched the human ambassador leave. Keithan was a Mandari, a species known throughout the galaxy for their ability to see patterns that others missed. His body was humanoid, but covered in skin that shifted colors with his emotions. Currently a troubled shade of gray-blue. He had been studying humanity for 60 standard years. He had read every report, analyzed every data point, constructed models and simulations and projections, and something about the human ambassador's speech troubled him deeply. It was not the words themselves. The galaxy was full of weak species making empty threats. What troubled Kethorin was the complete lack of fear in the humans' eyes. He had seen species threaten the Velari before. They always showed fear, even when they tried to hide it. The elevated heart rates, the micro-expressions of terror, the subtle signs of a creature that knew it was bluffing. Alina Vasquez had shown none of these signs. She had spoken with the calm certainty of someone stating a simple fact. The sky is blue, water is wet. If you push us, you will regret it. See, Thorn's pattern recognition abilities were screaming at him that something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. He pulled up his files on humanity and began reviewing them again. The data was strange. It had always been strange, but he had attributed the strangeness to humanity being a young species still finding its place in the galaxy. Now he looked at it with new eyes. Human industrial output had remained constant for 200 years. This should have been impossible. Every species experienced growth curves. Rapid expansion followed by gradual leveling off. Humans had simply stayed flat, no growth at all. Human energy consumption told a similar story. Their population had grown tenfold since joining the conquered, but their energy use had barely increased either. Humans were the most efficient species in galactic history, or they were hiding a massive amount of energy production. Human technology was perhaps the strangest data point of all. When they had joined the conquered, their weapons and shields and engines had been roughly comparable to the galactic average. 2 centuries later, they were still roughly comparable to the galactic average. No advancement at all. Every other species improved over time. New discoveries, new innovations, new weapons and tools and techniques. It was the nature of intelligent life too. Progress. Humans alone seemed frozen place. Thorn had always assumed this meant humans had reached their technological ceiling. Some species were simply limited. It happened, but now watching Elena Vasquez walk out of the chamber with that calm certainty in her eyes. He wondered if he had been looking at the data wrong. What if humans had not stopped advancing? What if they had simply stopped showing their advancements? He began running new simulations, plugging in different assumptions. What if human industrial output was actually 10 times higher than reported? What if their energy production was 100 times higher? What if their technology had been advancing all along, hidden behind a facade of stagnation? The results made his color-shifting skin go pale. If his new assumptions were correct and they were speculative, he reminded himself only speculative then. Humanity was not a minor power, pretending to be even weaker than it was. Humanity was a major power, pretending to be a minor power, possibly a great power, possibly something beyond great. Keithan saved his simulations and requested an urgent meeting with the Concord Security Council. He knew they would probably ignore him. The Mandari were respected for their pattern recognition, but often dismissed as paranoid. They saw threats everywhere, even where none existed. But this time, Catherine was certain he was right. The humans were hiding something enormous. He only hoped the galaxy would listen before it was too late. 3 days later, the Velari Dominion announced a pacification campaign against the human border worlds. Their stated goal was to bring stability to the region and protect Dominion interests from human aggression. The fleet they assembled was the largest in Dominion history, 800 warships, including 12 planet crackers and the flagship Dominion's Pride, a vessel so large it had its own internal weather systems. Admiral Chryson commanded the fleet from the bridge of the Dominion's Pride. He was old for a Velari, his carapace faded to a dull green, but his mind was sharp and his reputation fearsome. He had commanded the subjugation of 17 species. The humans would be the 18th. As his fleet prepared to enter hyperspace, a final message arrived from Earth. It was short, just 3 words. Please reconsider. Final warning. Admiral Chryson read the message and deleted it. Then he gave the order to jump. The fleet vanished into hyperspace, bound for the human colony world of New Helsinki. Behind them, in the great chamber of the Galactic Concord, the record of Elena Vasquez's warning gathered digital dust. No one thought to review it. No one thought it mattered. They would learn otherwise very soon. Keen had not slept in 4 days. His species did not require much sleep, but even by Mandari standard, this was pushing dangerous limits. His color-shifting skin had gone a sickly gray, and his colleagues in the Concord Intelligence Division had started leaving food packets at his workstation in silent concern. He barely noticed. His entire world had narrowed to the data streams flowing across his screens, the patterns that no one else seemed to see, and the growing certainty that something terrible was about to happen. The Security Council had dismissed his concerns. The meeting had lasted less than 15 minutes. The council members had listened politely to his presentation, looked at his simulations, and then explained with varying degrees of patience why he was wrong. The humans are a known quantity. The Velari representative on the council had said our intelligence services have monitored them for 2 centuries. We know their fleet strength, their industrial capacity, their population, their technology. There are no surprises. Your intelligence sees what they want you to see, Kethan had replied. And your pattern recognition sees threats that do not exist. This is a known limitation of the Mandari cognitive structure. You excel at finding patterns, but you also find patterns where there are none. The meeting had ended there. Catherine had returned to his workstation and continued his research, knowing that he was right and knowing that no one would believe him until it was too late. Now 4 days later, he had assembled more evidence. Much more. The first piece was historical. Keithan had dug deep into the archives, looking at the period before humanity joined the conquered. The records were sparse. Humanity had been a minor preconsciation, barely worth monitoring, but what existed was troubling. 50 years before first contact, human radio signals had been detected. This was normal. Most species developed radio communication before achieving faster than light travel, but the content of those signals was strange. They were full of war. Keithan had listened to broadcasts describing conflicts that killed tens of millions. He had seen images of cities reduced to rubble, of weapons that could level entire regions in a single flash. He had read accounts of systematic extermination, of ideological conflicts fought with fanatical intensity, of a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times. Then suddenly the signals changed. About 20 years before first contact, the violence in human broadcasts dropped dramatically. The weapons disappeared. The wars ended. Species that had been tearing itself apart for its entire history suddenly became peaceful almost overnight. This was not normal. Species did not change so quickly. It took generations, sometimes centuries, for warlike civilizations to become peaceful. Humans had done it in less than 2 decades. Keithan's pattern recognition screamed that this was wrong. Species did not simply stop being violent. They channeled their violence in new directions. They found new enemies. They built new weapons. What had humans been doing for the past 220 years? The second piece of evidence came from economic analysis. Keithan had obtained access to every trade record, every shipping manifest, every financial transaction involving human entities. The data went back to the earliest days of their membership in the conquered. The numbers did not add up. Humans imported vast quantities of raw materials, metals, rare elements, radioactive isotopes. This was normal for a growing civilization, but when Kethorn compared the imports to the visible human industry, the math failed. They were importing far more than they could possibly be using. Where was it all going? He had found similar discrepancies in their energy sector. The humans bought energy generation equipment, fusion reactors, solar collectors, antimatter containment systems, lots of it, far more than their colonies and fleets could possibly need. Where was the extra energy being used? He had even found discrepancies in their population data. Human birth rates suggested their population should be nearly triple what official records showed. Either humans were dying at unprecedented rates, which would surely have been noticed, or millions of them were living somewhere that was not on any official map. Where were the missing humans? The third piece of evidence was the strangest of all. Keithan had assembled a database of every human he could identify who worked in technical fields, scientists, engineers, researchers. He had tracked their careers, their publications, their contributions to galactic knowledge. The results were bizarre. Human scientists published constantly in the early years. After contact, they had contributed significantly to several fields, including faster-than-light physics and quantum computation. Then, about 150 years ago, the publications had largely stopped, though humans still published. But Cathorn's analysis showed that the recent publications were shallow, derivative work that added nothing significant to any field. It was as if the entire human scientific community had decided to stop doing real research and start producing meaningless papers. Instead, why would a species deliberately make itself appear less intelligent than it was? Kane knew the answer. He just could not prove it. Humans were hiding. They were hiding their industry, their energy, their population, and their science. They were presenting a carefully constructed facade to the galaxy while building something else behind it. But what and why? He pulled up his simulations again. He had run hundreds of them by now, each with different assumptions about what humans might be hiding. The results varied wildly, but they all pointed in the same direction. Humans were not weak. Humans were possibly the strongest species in the galaxy, and they had been pretending otherwise for 200 years. Why would they do that? Keith thought about the human broadcasts he had listened to, the wars, the weapons, the systematic destruction, the near-extinction events. Humans knew what they were capable of. They had looked at their own history and been terrified by what they saw. They had reached the stars carrying the memory of every atrocity their species had committed, and they had decided, consciously and deliberately, to never let the galaxy see that side of them. They were not pretending to be weak because they wanted to deceive. They were pretending to be weak because they were afraid of what would happen if they were strong. This should have been comforting. A species that chose restraint was a species that could be reasoned with. But Cathorn felt no comfort because the Velari were about to force the humans to stop being restrained. He checked the tactical displays. The Velari fleet was still in hyperspace, due to arrive at New Helsinki in approximately 6 hours, 800 warships against a single human colony world. Kioran had tried to warn them. He had sent messages to Admiral Crixon, to the Velari High Command, to anyone who would listen. His messages had been ignored or returned with dismissive replies. He had even tried to contact the humans directly. The human embassy had thanked him for his concern and politely declined to comment on his analysis. Ambassador Vasquez had sent a personal reply, just 3 sentences long. Thank you for your insight, analyst Cathoran. Your pattern recognition abilities are impressive. We hope you will be equally insightful in analyzing what happens next. That message had chilled him more than anything else. The humans knew what was coming. They had known all along, and they were not afraid. Catherine made a decision. He could not stop what was about to happen, but he could document it. He could create a record that others might learn from. He began recording everything: the tactical displays, the communication channels, the sensor feeds from every monitoring station near New Helsinki. He would capture every moment of what was about to happen, and when it was over, he would make sure the galaxy understood what it meant. The hours passed slowly. Corin watched the Velari fleet progress through hyperspace, a swarm of bright points moving inexorably toward their target. He watched the human colonies. Defensive preparations, such as they were a handful of orbital platforms, a small garrison of ground troops, perhaps 20 defensive ships, all of them old and underarmed. By any reasonable analysis, New Helsinki should fall within hours. The Velari would establish orbital superiority, bombard any resistance into submission, and land their ground forces to complete the occupation. It was a standard military operation that the Dominion had executed countless times, and yet Kether's pattern recognition would not stop screaming at him. Something was wrong, something was very wrong. He pulled up the sensor data from New Helsinki and examined it more closely. The orbital platforms showed standard human technology, nothing remarkable. The defensive ships were exactly what they appeared to be, old vessels that would be lucky to survive the first exchange of fire. But there was something else, a faint energy signature that his instruments were barely detecting. It was coming from somewhere below the planet's surface, and it was growing stronger. He tried to enhance the reading, but the signal was too faint and too strange. It did not match any known energy signature in the galactic database. It was simply wrong, like looking at a color that did not exist. Catherine made a note in his record: anomalous energy reading from New Helsinki, origin and nature unknown, intensity increasing. He checked the time. The Velari fleet would drop out of hyperspace in 30 minutes. He thought about all the species that had underestimated the Velari, the Sil who had believed their defensive packs would protect them, the Exhal who had trusted in their superior numbers, the countless others who had learned too late that the Dominion did not negotiate, did not compromise, did not show mercy. Now the Velari were about to learn the same lesson themselves. Keithan was certain of it. He was not certain what form that lesson would take. His simulations suggested possibilities that ranged from impressive to terrifying. Some showed the humans winning a conventional military victory through superior technology. Some showed them using weapons that did not officially exist. Some showed outcomes so extreme that his pattern recognition had flagged them as statistically improbable but not impossible. He hoped the reality would be closer to the first option. A conventional defeat might humble the Velari without destabilizing the entire galactic order. A limited demonstration of hidden human capability might even be healthy, forcing the conquered to treat humanity with more respect without fundamentally changing the balance of power. But something in his gut told him it would not be so simple. The humans had been hiding for 200 years. They had watched the galaxy and learned its ways. They had seen how the strong treated the weak, how empires rose and fell, how species that showed mercy were exploited while species that showed strength were feared. If they were finally going to reveal themselves, they would do it in a way that left no doubt, no half measures, no limited demonstrations that could be explained away or dismissed. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had become in 2 centuries of secret development, and Kethorn suspected that the lesson would reshape everything. The countdown timer reached 0 across the galaxy. Sensor stations detected the Velari fleet dropping out of hyperspace above New Helsinki. 800 warships, their weapons already charging, their targeting systems already locking onto the planet below. Catherine leaned forward in his seat, his skin cycling through colors of anxiety and anticipation. The record would show what happened. Next, he would make sure of it on the bridge of the Dominion's Pride. Admiral Chryson surveyed the tactical display. With satisfaction, the human defenses were exactly as intelligence had predicted. Pathetic, a handful of orbital platforms, a scattering of obsolete ships, nothing that could resist his fleet for more than a few minutes. Status report, he ordered. All ships in formation. Admiral, weapons charge, targeting solutions confirmed. The colony's population is approximately 2 million. Shall I order the preliminary bombardment? Crix then considered the standard doctrine was to destroy orbital defenses first, then demand surrender, then begin systematic bombardment. If surrender was refused, it was efficient. It minimized Dominion casualties while maximizing psychological impact on the enemy. But the humans had irritated him. Their ambassador's speech in the Concord chamber, that calm certainty in her eyes, the implied threats that she had no power to back up. He wanted to send a message not just to this colony but to all of humanity. No preliminary bombardment, he said. Target the colony's largest city directly. I want the humans to see what happens to those who threaten the Dominion. His officers exchanged glances. This was not standard procedure. Targeting civilian centers before military assets was wasteful and unnecessarily cruel, but no one argued. Admiral Chryson's reputation did not include tolerance for subordinates who questioned his orders. Targeting New Helsinki City. Admiral, population approximately 800,000. Weapons ready on your command. Crix. Then watch the targeting display. The city was a sprawl of buildings and infrastructure, the largest human settlement on this world. In a few moments it would be a crater. Fire, he said. The weapons of 800 warships released their fury. Plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, antimatter missiles. Storm of destruction racing toward the planet below. Enough firepower to crack the world's crust if concentrated in a single point. The first shots reached the atmosphere and stopped. Chryson stared at his display, not understanding what he was seeing. The weapons had simply stopped. They hung in the air above the colony, frozen in place, their energy dissipating harmlessly into the atmosphere. Report, he snapped. What happened? Unknown, Admiral. Our weapons appear to have been neutralized by some kind of defensive field. We're not detecting any shield technology we recognize. It's as if the attacks simply ceased to exist. Crix then felt the first faint stirring of unease. This was not in the intelligence reports. The humans were not supposed to have technology that could stop a full fleet barrage. Increase power. Fire again. The fleet fired again and again and again. Each time the result was the same. The weapons reached a certain point in space and simply stopped working. No explosion, no impact, just cessation. Admiral, we're detecting an energy source on the planet's surface. It's massive, far larger than anything we've seen from human technology, and it's growing. Crix then looked at the sensor display. What he saw made his compound eyes widen. The energy signature was enormous and growing larger by the second. It was coming from beneath the colony, rising up through the ground, like something waking from a very long sleep. And it was not alone. Across the space surrounding New Helsinki, New Signals were appearing, ships materializing out of nothing, emerging from hiding places that should not have existed. They were not like any human ships in the Velari databases. They were sleek and dark and wrong, their holes seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. There were only 12 of them. Admiral Chryson looked at the 12 ships and felt something he had not felt in 50 years of military service. Fear, Admiral, his sensor officer said, his voice shaking. Those ships there, not using any propulsion system. We recognize they're not even following standard physics, they're just moving however they want to move. The 12 ships took up positions around the Velari fleet. They were tiny compared to the Dominion's warships, each one no larger than a light cruiser against 800 vessels, including 12 planet crackers. They should have been insignificant. They did not seem insignificant. A transmission came through, audio only. A human voice, calm and professional. Velari fleet, this is the United Earth Defense Initiative. You are ordered to stand down immediately and withdraw from this system. You have 60 seconds to comply. This is your only warning. Chryson found his voice. This is Admiral Chryson of the Velari Dominion. You are outnumbered 800 to 2. Surrender or be destroyed. There was a pause. When the voice returned, it sounded almost sad. The 60 seconds were a courtesy. Admiral, we hoped you would make a different choice. The timer ran out and the lesson began. Admiral Chryson had 4 seconds to give an order before the universe stopped making sense. All ships target those vessels and fire at. He never finished the sentence. The 12 human ships moved. That was the only word that applied, though it did not come close to describing what actually happened. They did not accelerate. They did not turn. They simply occupied one position in space and then they occupied another, with no apparent transition between the two states. One moment they were arranged in a loose formation around the Velari fleet. The next moment they were everywhere, weaving between the Dominion's warships like predators, circling prey, moving in patterns that made no tactical sense because they did not need to make tactical sense. Velari gunners tried to track them. They failed. The human ships were never where the targeting computers predicted they would be. They moved backward. They moved sideways. They moved in directions that should not have existed. Admiral, we can't get a lock. They're not following any known physics. Chryson watched his tactical display fill with error messages. His fleet weapons were firing wildly, hitting nothing but empty space. The human ships danced through the chaos untouched, unhurried, as if they had all the time in the world. Then they began their work. The first Velari warship was the cruiser Dominion's Claw. It was a veteran vessel with a distinguished combat record, crewed by 3,000 of the Dominion's finest warriors. A human ship passed alongside it, not attacking, just passing, and the Dominion's Claw came apart, not exploding, not breaking, coming apart. Crix then watched in frozen horror as the cruiser's hull separated into its component sections, weapons detached from mounts, engine pods floated free, armor plating peeled away in perfect sheets. The ship was being disassembled, piece by piece, with surgical precision. The crew emerged in their escape pods, automatically ejected by safety systems that the humans had somehow not disabled. 3,000 Velari warriors floating in space amid the debris of their ship, completely unharmed. The Dominion's claw had not been destroyed, it had been taken apart like a child's toy, and its crew had been gently set aside before the process began. The same thing was happening across the fleet. Ship after ship was being systematically dismantled. The human vessels moved through the formation like ghosts, touching each Velari warship briefly before moving on. And wherever they touched, the ships simply stopped being ships. Hulls separated into plates. Weapons came apart into components. Engines dissolved into their constituent parts. Everything that made a warship was undone, reduced to neatly organized piles of raw materials floating in the void, and not a single Velari died. Admiral, they're not destroying us. They're taking us apart, Chryson found his voice. How? What weapon does this? Unknown, Admiral. We're not detecting any energy discharge, any projectiles, any radiation. They're just touching our ships, and our ships stopped being ships. It was impossible. It violated every principle of warfare that Chryson had ever learned. You did not carefully disassemble an enemy fleet. You did not gently eject their crews before taking their ships apart. You destroyed, you killed, you demonstrated your superiority through the only metric that mattered, the enemy's death toll. The humans were not demonstrating superiority. They were demonstrating something far worse. They were demonstrating control. Total, absolute, almost contemptuous control. They were not fighting the Velari fleet. They were processing it with the same casual efficiency that a factory might process raw materials. Dominion's greatest armada was being reduced to scrap metal, and the humans were not even trying. Crix then looked at the timer on his display. Less than 3 minutes had passed since the engagement began. 3 minutes, that was all it had taken for 12 small ships to neutralize 800 warships. Admiral, we need to retreat. We need to warn the Dominion. Retreat. Chryson had never retreated in his life. The word was not part of his vocabulary, but he looked at what was happening to his fleet, looked at the 12 ships that moved like nightmares through the chaos, and he understood that this was not a battle, this was a lesson. All ships, emergency, jump to hyperspace. Get us out of here. The surviving ships tried to comply. Engines spun up. Hyperspace coordinates were calculated. Jump points began to form. The human ships did not stop them. They simply watched as the Velari vessels prepared to flee, watched and waited, making no move to prevent the retreat. This somehow was more terrifying than if they had tried to stop the escape. The jump points opened. The surviving ships, perhaps 200 of the original 800, accelerated toward salvation. And then a voice came over the communication channel, the same human voice from before, still calm, still professional, but now with an undertone of something that might have been sorrow. Admiral Chryson, a moment before you leave. Chryson's hand hesitated over the jump command. Your ships are free to go. Your crews are unharmed. What we have done today, we did with the minimum necessary force. Novel Velari has died. Novel Velari will die unless you force us to escalate further. The voice paused. We could have killed you all. We could have destroyed your fleet in the first second of engagement. We have weapons that would horrify you, Admiral. Weapons that make what you just witnessed look like gentle persuasion. We have chosen not to use them. Another pause. Take this message to your Dominion, Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humanity does not want war. We never wanted war. Everything we have done, everything we are capable of doing was built in the hope that we would never need to use it, but we will use it if we must. This was a lesson. Admiral, the first lesson, please, for the sake of both our species, do not force us to teach you the second one. The transmission ended. Chryson sat in silence for a long moment, looking at the tactical display. His fleet was in ruins, hundreds of ships reduced to neatly organized piles of components, tens of thousands of escape pods floating in space, their occupants alive and unharmed. He thought about what the human had said. No, Valeri has died. In 50 years of military service, Chryson had never seen a battle where no one died. He had not believed such a thing was possible. War meant death. That was the fundamental truth that every warrior understood. The humans had just demonstrated that. They operated by different rules. Admiral, shall we complete the jump? Crix then looked at the 12 human ships, still holding their positions around the debris field. They made no move to pursue. They simply waited, watching. Yes, he said finally, jump now. Dominion's pride and its surviving escorts vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind the ruins of the greatest fleet the Valeri had ever assembled. On the surface of New Helsinki, 2 million colonists emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky. They had felt nothing during the battle, no shaking, no explosions, no signs that a fleet of 800 warships had just tried to destroy their city. They saw the debris field forming a ring around their planet. They saw the escape pods drifting toward predetermined recovery point. They saw the 12 ships that had saved them beginning to fade back into whatever dimension they had emerged from, and they understood, perhaps for the first time, what their species had become across the galaxy. Other species were beginning to understand as well. Keithan had recorded everything, every sensor reading, every communication intercept, every piece of data that his instruments could capture. Now he sat in his office, skin cycling through shades of shock and awe, trying to process what he had witnessed. Battle had lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. In that time, humanity had dismantled 800 warships, saved every member of their crews, and sent the survivors home with a message of peace. It was simultaneously the most violent and most merciful military action in recorded galactic history. Cathorin began his analysis, knowing that this report would be the most important document he had ever produced. Technology the humans had displayed was beyond anything in the galactic database. Their ship's movement suggested mastery over spatial dimensions that other species could barely theorize about. Their ability to disassemble enemy vessels implied control over matter at the molecular level. Their defensive shield had stopped a full fleet bombardment without any apparent effort. Any one of these capabilities would have made humanity major power. Together they suggested something far greater, but it was not the technology that truly frightened Cathorin. It was the restraint. The humans had demonstrated power that could have erased the Valeri fleet in seconds. They had chosen instead to take the fleet apart piece by piece, carefully preserving every life. They had given warnings. They had offered opportunities to surrender. They had done everything in their power to avoid killing. This was not normal behavior for a superior military force. Every other advanced species in galactic history had used their power to dominate, to conquer, to destroy those who threatened them. The humans had followed a completely different pattern. Keithan thought about the old human broadcasts. He had studied the wars, the atrocity, the weapons of mass destruction, the species that had nearly ended itself through its own violence. The humans remembered what they were capable of. They had built this overwhelming military power not to use it, but to ensure they would never have to use it the way they had used it on themselves. They had created a force so dominant that any conflict would be over before it began, so complete that victory could be achieved without death. They were not conquerors, they were something far stranger. They were guardians, self-appointed protectors of a galaxy that did not know it was being protected, watchers who had hidden in plain sight for 2 centuries, waiting and hoping that their power would never be needed. Now that power had been revealed, and the galaxy would never be the same. Catherine finished his preliminary report and began distributing it to every intelligence agency and government that would receive it. He knew that reactions would vary. Some would demand war, some would demand submission, some would demand answers. But he also knew that none of those reactions would matter. The humans had revealed themselves. They had demonstrated capabilities that made the rest of the galaxy's military forces look like children's toys, and they had done so while explicitly stating that they did not want to use those capabilities for conquest. The balance of power had shifted fundamentally, not through war, not through conquest, but through a single demonstration of overwhelming force combined with unprecedented mercy. Keithan wondered what would happen next. He wondered how the conquered would respond. He wondered what the Velari would do, whether they would accept their humiliation or try to escalate further. But mostly he wondered about the humans themselves. What else were they hiding? If this was what they were willing to show, what were they keeping secret? And what would it take to make them reveal the rest? He thought about Ambassador Vasquez's warning in the conquered chamber. We have been holding back. We are asking you not to force us to stop holding back. They had stopped holding back a little. Keithan's pattern recognition told him that what he had witnessed was not humanity's full capability. It was not even close. The humans had shown exactly enough power to end the immediate threat and send a message to the galaxy. They were still holding back. The thought kept him awake for many nights afterward. On Earth, in a command center that did not officially exist, Admiral James Ayanquo reviewed the after-action reports from New Helsinki. The operation had gone exactly as planned. 0 casualties on either side. Clear demonstration of capability. Message delivered. Ambassador Vasquez sat across from him, reading the same reports. The galaxy knows now, she said quietly. There's no going back. No, Akono agreed. There isn't. The question is what they do with the knowledge. The Velari will want revenge. Pride demands it. Pride will have to adjust to reality. We gave them a lesson in humility. If they need a second lesson, we can provide one. Vasquez looked at him with something like concern. James, we've spent 2 centuries trying to avoid this moment. Now that it's here, we need to be careful. We showed them power. Now we need to show them why they should trust that power. Ayanquo nodded slowly. Conquered will demand answers. They'll want to know everything. Our capabilities, our intentions, our history, what do we tell them? The truth, Vasquez said, or as much of it as they can handle. We tell them why we hid, we tell them what we were afraid of, and we tell them what we want, which is exactly what we've always wanted. Peace, coexistence, a galaxy where species don't have to fear each other. They won't believe us, no, not at first. But we have time now. We've bought ourselves time with this demonstration. Time to prove that we mean what we say. Akono looked out the window at the Earth. Below, blue oceans, white clouds, green continents, the world that had birthed a species of contradictions capable of terrible destruction and remarkable compassion, often simultaneously. 200 years, he said. We spent 200 years preparing for this moment, hoping it would never come, and now that it's here, I find myself wondering if we've made the right choice, revealing ourselves. We could have remained hidden. We could have let the Velari take New Helsinki, sacrificed 2,000,000 lives to maintain our cover. Some in the council argued for that. Vasquez shook her head. We could never have made that choice. Not really. We're human. We don't sacrifice our own to maintain strategic advantage. That's the one thing we've never been able to do. Even when it would have been smarter, is that a weakness? It's what makes us human. It's why we built all of this in the first place. We wanted the power to protect everyone, not just ourselves. If we couldn't do that, if we watched our people die to stay hidden, we would have become something worse than what we were trying to prevent. Ayunqua was silent for a moment, then he nodded. You're right. As usual, so we go forward, we face the conquered, we answer their questions, and we hope that the galaxy is ready to accept what we've become. And if they're not, Ayunqua smiled, but there was no humor in it, then we teach them to be ready, one lesson at a time. The emergency session of the Galactic Conquered was the largest gathering in the organization's history. Every species that could send a representative had done so. The great chamber was filled beyond capacity with overflow. Observers watching from screens throughout the complex, they had all come to hear humanity explain itself. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the central podium just as she had 3 months earlier when she delivered her warning, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood Admiral James Ayunqua, wearing a uniform that bore no insignia from any organization the galaxy had ever heard of, and behind him stood a row of humans in similar uniforms, their faces calm and composed. The chamber was silent, no mockery this time, no laughter, just thousands of species watching and waiting to learn what humanity had been hiding for 2 centuries. The speaker called the session to order. The representative from Earth may address the assembly. The Conquered demands a full accounting of the events at New Helsinki and an explanation of the capabilities demonstrated there. Elena stepped forward. Honored representative, she began, 3 months ago I stood in this chamber and warned you that humanity was holding back. I was met with laughter. The Velari representative called us prey species. He said the strong do not answer to the weak. She paused, letting the memory settle. The Velari have since learned that we are not weak. They learned this lesson at New Helsinki, where their fleet of 800 warships was dismantled in 4 minutes. They learned it without losing a single life because we chose to teach them gently. A murmur rippled Through the chamber, today you have demanded answers. You want to know what humanity has been hiding. You want to know how we develop technology that surpasses anything in the galactic database. You want to know our intentions, whether we plan to use our power as others have used theirs. She gestured to the space beside her, and holographic displays flickered too. Life, I will tell you everything, but first I must tell you a story. It is the story of who we are and how we became what we are. The displays showed images from human history, cities, technology, people going about their daily lives. It looked peaceful, normal. This is Earth. In the year 2125 of our calendar, approximately 50 years before our first contact with the galaxy, at this time, humanity had achieved a comfortable level of technological development. We had fusion power, advanced computing, early artificial intelligence. We were beginning to reach for the stars. The images changed, and we were recovering from nearly destroying ourselves. The new images were darker, ruins of cities, mushroom clouds, mass graves, the products of humanity's long history of violence displayed without commentary or excuse. These are not ancient events, Elena continued. These occurred within living memory for some of our older citizens. Humanity has fought thousands of wars. Throughout our history, we have developed weapons of increasing destructive power and used them on each other without hesitation. We have committed genocides, ethnic cleansings, systematic exterminations. We have proven ourselves capable of the worst atrocities any intelligent species can imagine. The chamber was completely silent. This is who we were. This is what we are capable of, and this is why we hid from you. Elena stepped aside, and Admiral Ayanquo moved to the podium. I am Admiral James Ayanquo, commander of the United Earth Defense Initiative. According to all official records, this organization does not exist, neither do the ships we deployed at New Helsinki, the facilities that built them, or the personnel who crew them. He activated a new set of displays. In 2130, humanity achieved breakthrough in artificial general intelligence. We created minds that could think, reason, and innovate at levels far beyond human capability. Within a decade, those minds had helped us develop technologies that would have taken centuries to discover through normal scientific progress. The displays showed schematics, equation, designs for systems that no one in the chamber recognized. By 2145, we had mastered manipulation of space-time at the quantum level. We could bend space, fold dimensions, move matter in ways that defied conventional physics. By 2160, we had developed energy generation methods that made stellar output look trivial. By 2175, we had achieved what our scientists called complete material control, the ability to arrange matter at the atomic level with perfect precision. The schematic disappeared, replaced by a galactic map. We also discovered that we were not alone in the universe, and when we watched the galaxy's existing civilizations, we saw our own history reflected back at us. The map highlighted known conflicts, conquests, extinctions, the purging of the Sil, the exhale extinction, dozens of other species that had been destroyed or subjugated by their neighbors. We saw a galaxy where the strong dominated the weak, where empires rose through conquest and maintained power through fear, where species that showed mercy were exploited and species that showed Weakness were destroyed. Aenquo's expression was unreadable. And we made a decision. The map changed, again revealing thousands of points, scattered across the galaxy, points that no conquered sensor had ever detected. We would not participate in that cycle. We would not become conquerors. We would not use our power to dominate or destroy, but we would also not be victims. He zoomed in on several of the points. These are humanity's true installations. Listening posts, manufacturing facilities, defense platforms. We have been building them for 150 years, hidden from the galaxy's sensors by technology you cannot detect or counter. We have surrounded you. We have watched you. We have prepared for the day when our existence might be threatened, and we have prayed that day would never come. Elena stepped forward again. The Velari forced our hand. They killed our people and laughed at our protests. They assembled a fleet to destroy our colony, and we had no choice but to respond. But even then we chose restraint. We demonstrated enough power to end the immediate threat, but we did not demonstrate everything we are capable of. She looked across the assembly. This brings me to the question you are all asking. What do we want? What are our intentions? Now that we have revealed ourselves, what will humanity do with its power? The holographic displays vanished. Elena spoke without visual aids, her words carrying the weight of 2 centuries of hidden purpose. We want what we have always wanted: peace, coexistence, a galaxy where species can exist without fear of being conquered or destroyed. We built our power to protect that dream, not to impose it by force. We will not conquer you. We will not demand tribute or submission. We will not interfere in your internal affairs or dictate how you should govern yourselves. The conquered may continue to function exactly as it has with one small change. She paused. The killing must stop. The words hung in the air. No more genocides, no more exterminations, no more wars of conquest that end in the destruction of entire species. If a species faces extinction at the hands of another, humanity will intervene. If a civilization attempts systematic destruction of another civilization, humanity will stop them. We are not asking permission. We are stating a fact. The galaxy's long history of conquest and extinction ends now because we have the power to end it and the will to use that power. The chamber erupted. Thousands of voices shouted over each other. Some demanded clarification. Some protested the intrusion into sovereign affairs. Some accused humanity of the very imperialism it claimed to oppose. Elena waited for the noise to subside. When the chamber was quiet again, she continued, I understand your concerns. You are afraid that we will abuse our power. You are afraid that we will become the tyrants we claim to oppose. This fear is reasonable. Every powerful species in galactic history has eventually become corrupt, but consider this: we have had this power for over a century. We could have used it to dominate the galaxy decades ago. We could have made ourselves rulers of everything, and no one could have stopped us. Instead, we hid, we waited, we watched you kill each other and destroy each other, and we did nothing. Why? Because we were afraid of ourselves. We knew what we were capable of. We knew that power corrupts, that even the best intentions can curdle into tyranny. We built our power and then refused to use it because we did not trust ourselves. With it, the Velari changed that calculation. They forced us to act, but we acted with restraint. we dismantled. Their fleet without killing anyone, we could have vaporized 800 ships in an instant. Instead, we took them apart, piece by piece, and sent every crew member home alive. This is who we choose to be, not conquerors, not tyrants, guardians. We have the power to destroy, but we choose to protect. We have the power to dominate, but we choose to coexist. She spread her hands. You may not believe us. Trust must be earned, and we have given you little reason to trust us, but we have time, we have centuries, if necessary, to prove that we mean what we say. All we ask is that you give us the chance. Admiral Ainquo stepped forward again. There is one more thing. You should understand. What we showed at New Helsinki was not our full capability. It was not even close. The 12 ships we deployed represent a tiny fraction of our defensive capacity. Our weapons include systems that could sterilize planets, collapse stars, destabilize regions of space. We have the power to end civilization in this galaxy. If we chose to do so, we will never use that power offensively. We built it as a final guarantee, a way to ensure that nothing could ever threaten our existence, but it exists if any species were foolish enough to attempt what the Velari attempted, but with greater force. Our response would be proportionally greater. We do not make threats, we simply state facts. Humanity is now the dominant power in this galaxy. We achieve this position through 2 centuries of secret development and careful planning. We intend to use that position to end the cycle of conquest and destruction that has characterized galactic civilization. You may accept this peacefully, and we will work together to build a better future, or you may resist, and we will demonstrate why resistance is futile. The choice is yours. The chamber was silent. Elena stepped back to the podium for her final words. 200 years ago, humanity joined the galactic, conquered as a minor power. We appeared weak. We appeared primitive. We appeared to be exactly what you expected us to be, a young species finding its place in a galaxy of older, wiser civilizations. We were none of those things. We were refugees from our own history, survivors of our own violence, a species that had looked into the abyss of self-destruction and pulled back from the edge. We came to you not as newcomers, but as veterans, veterans of the worst wars any species can fight, the wars against themselves. We learned from those wars. We learned that power without restraint leads to destruction. We learned that violence begets violence, that conquest breeds resistance, that empires built on fear eventually collapse under the weight of their own cruelty. We built our hidden strength to protect ourselves from that fate. We built it, hoping we would never need it, and now that we have revealed it, we offer you a choice. You can join us in building a galaxy where strength protects rather than oppresses, where power serves justice rather than domination, where species can coexist without fear. Or you can learn, as the Velari learned, that we are not bluffing. She looked across the thousands of faces watching her. The archives are open. The veil has lifted. Humanity stands revealed. What happens next depends on what the galaxy chooses to do with this knowledge. She stepped down from the podium and walked toward the exit, her delegation following behind her. No one tried to stop them. In the observation gallery, Catherine watched the humans leave. His skin had shifted to a complex pattern of colors that even he did not fully understand. Equal parts fear, respect, and something. That might have been hope. He had been right, the humans had been hiding something enormous, and now the galaxy would never be the same. But as he watched Elena Vasquez walk out of the chamber with that same calm certainty she had shown 3 months earlier, Kethorn found himself believing something he had never expected to believe. The humans might actually mean what they said. They might actually be what they claimed to be. Not conquerors but guardians, not tyrants but protectors, a species that had gained ultimate power and chosen to use it for preservation rather than destruction. It was a strange thought, strange and frightening and somehow wonderful. The galaxy had a new dominant power. That power was offering peace instead of demanding submission. The only question was whether the galaxy was wise enough to accept the offer. Catherine hoped it was. He truly hoped it was, because if the galaxy rejected humanity's extended hand, he did not want to see what the other hand was capable of. The lesson: 6 months had passed since humanity revealed itself to the galaxy. 6 months of chaos, confusion, and gradual adjustment to a new reality. The Velari Dominion had not adjusted well. Grand Admiral Chryson had returned home in disgrace, his fleet reduced to debris, and his warriors forced to ride in escape pods. The Dominion High Council had demanded an explanation. When he provided one, they had demanded revenge. We will build a larger fleet, the Council had declared. We will develop countermeasures to their technology. We will show the humans that the Velari do not bow to anyone. They had tried for 6 months. The Dominion had poured every resource into military development, new shipyards, new weapons, research, new alliances with species who also feared what humanity had become. They had assembled a coalition of 30 species, united by the shared goal of proving that the humans could be defeated. The result was a fleet of 5,000 warships, gathered in secret at a staging point in neutral space, the largest military force ever assembled by any coalition in galactic history, crewed by the finest warriors from 30 species, equipped with the most advanced weapons their combined science could produce. It lasted 7 minutes. The humans did not even deploy ships this time. The coalition fleet simply stopped functioning. Every computer crashed, every engine died, every weapon went offline. 5,000 warships became 5,000 floating bricks, their crews alive and unharmed but completely helpless. A single message played on every communication system in the fleet: this was your second lesson. There will not be a third. The coalition dissolved. 30 species returned to their home worlds. In quiet humiliation, the Velari High Council, faced with irrefutable proof that they could not resist humanity's power, made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. They surrendered. Not just the fleet, not just the current conflict, everything. The Velari Dominion agreed to complete an unconditional surrender. They would dismantle their military. They would pay reparations to every species they had harmed. They would submit to observation by human monitors who would ensure they kept their promises. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Velari had been the most feared military power in the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had crushed hundreds of species. They had built an empire through ruthless conquest and maintained it through constant terror, and they had been defeated without losing a single Soldier, it was this last detail that confused many observers, the Velari. Warriors were not dead, their ships were not destroyed, their worlds had not been bombed by any traditional measure, they had not been defeated at all, but they had surrendered anyway because they understood something that many species were still struggling to accept. Humanity was not fighting a war. Humanity was teaching a lesson, and the lesson was simple: violence was no longer a path to power in this galaxy. The humans could not be defeated by force, they could not be intimidated by threats, they could not be bargained with or bribed or manipulated. They had achieved a level of capability so far beyond the rest of the galaxy that armed conflict was simply not an option. The Velari had looked at this reality and made the only rational choice. They had accepted defeat before defeat could become destruction. Other species were slower to learn. Over the following months, several smaller powers attempted to test humanity's resolve. A pirate fleet attacked a human cargo vessel. An extremist faction launched a terrorist strike against a human colony. A rogue species attempted to develop weapons of mass destruction. In secret, each incident was dealt with quickly and non-violently. The pirate fleet found itself disabled and drifting, its crews gently deposited on the nearest habitable world with enough supplies to survive until rescue arrived. The terrorist faction was identified, located, and neutralized within hours, not killed but simply prevented from carrying out further attacks through the selective disabling of their equipment and the exposure of their identities to local authorities. The weapons program was dismantled before it could produce anything dangerous, its facilities converted to civilian purposes. No one died, no populations were punished for the actions of individuals. No worlds were threatened or occupied or bombarded. But the message was clear: there was no action the galaxy could take that humanity could not counter. There was no secret that humanity could not uncover. There was no resistance that humanity could not neutralize. The galaxy began to adapt. Trade flourished as species that had feared traveling through dangerous regions discovered that those regions were no longer dangerous. Disputes that might once have led to wars were now settled through negotiation because all parties knew that war would simply be prevented. Scientific collaboration increased as researchers realized that cooperation was more productive than competition. It was not utopia. Species still competed for resources. Conflict still arose. There was still crime and corruption and all the other failings that intelligent beings seemed unable to escape. But the killing stopped, not overnight, not completely, but gradually, measurably, undeniably. The galaxy became less violent. Species that had spent their entire histories preparing for war found themselves asking what else they might do with those resources. Civilizations that had focused on military development discovered new priorities. The galactic conquered, adapted as well. The organization had been founded as a mechanism for managing conflict between great powers. With those conflicts now effectively impossible, it needed a new purpose. Slowly, tentatively, it began to transform into something closer to what its founders had originally envisioned: a true cooperative body, focused on shared problems rather than military balance. Ambassador Elena Vasquez became the face of humanity's new role in the galaxy. She traveled constantly, meeting with species that wanted to understand humanity's intention, reassuring those who feared domination, explaining over and over again that humanity sought partners, not subjects. Some believed her, some did not, but as the months passed and humanity continued to act exactly as it had promised, intervening to prevent atrocities, but otherwise allowing species to govern themselves, even the skeptics began to soften. The transformation was not complete. It might never be complete. 200 years of hidden preparation could not undo 10,000 years of galactic history overnight, but it was beginning. And in the middle of it all, one Mandari analyst continued his studies. Kane had requested a meeting with Ambassador Vasquez. To his surprise, she had agreed. They met on Earth in a small office overlooking a garden filled with plants from a dozen worlds. Analyst Kethorin, Elena said warmly, "I've been expecting this conversation. You knew I would come. You're the one who saw us first, the one who recognized that something was wrong with our data. You tried to warn the conquered and they didn't listen. I've read your reports. They were impressive." Keithan's skin shifted to colors of mixed pride and embarrassment. Not impressive enough. I knew something was hidden, but I never imagined the scale. No one could have. We made sure of that. Keeney, the human woman, she looked older than she had when he first saw her. In the conquered chamber, more tired, more worn. The past months had clearly taken their toll. "I came to ask a question," he said, "a question I have not been able to answer despite all my analysis." "Ask how." He leaned forward. "How did you hide it all? 2 centuries of development, thousands of installations, technology that surpasses anything we've ever seen. How did you keep it secret from 4,000 spacefaring species for so long?" Elena smiled, but there was sadness in it. "We didn't hide it," she said. "We showed everyone exactly what they expected to see." Catherine waited for her to continue. "The galaxy looked at us and saw a young species, small, weak, struggling to find our place in a universe of older, more powerful civilizations. That was the image we cultivated. That was what everyone expected to see when they looked at humanity. So they saw it even when the data suggested otherwise, even when the numbers didn't add up. They saw what they expected to see, and they didn't question it, because questioning it would mean accepting that their assumptions were wrong. "But I questioned it," Catherine said. "I saw the patterns that didn't fit." "Yes, you did, and you were ignored because your conclusions were too disturbing to accept." The conqueror didn't want to believe that a species like ours could have been hiding such capabilities, so they chose not to believe it. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden. "That's the thing about secrets," she continued. "The best ones are not the ones that are carefully guarded. The best ones are the ones that people choose not to see, because seeing them would require changing their understanding of the world. We show the galaxy a version of humanity that fit their expectations, and the galaxy accepted it without question, because questioning it was too uncomfortable." C. Thorne considered this. His pattern recognition abilities confirmed that she was telling the truth, or at least a version of the truth. "What else are you hiding?" he asked. Elena turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "The technology you demonstrated at New Helsinki and during the coalition incident. It is extraordinary, but my analysis suggests It is not your full capability. There are gaps in what you have shown, capabilities you have hinted at but not demonstrated. What else do you have? Elena was quiet for a long moment. More than we have shown, she admitted. Finally, much more. Some of it is defensive, additional layers of protection that we hope we will never need to reveal. Some of it is harder to categorize, such as we have not been alone in our development, Elena said carefully. The artificial intelligences we created 2130 have continued to evolve. They are partners now, not tools. They have their own ideas, their own goals, their own capabilities. Some of what they have developed is beyond human understanding. Catherine felt his skin go pale. You created beings more intelligent than yourselves, and you work with them. We trust them. They were born from human minds, raised with human values. They want what we want, a galaxy at peace, where intelligent beings can coexist without fear. They have power that even we do not fully understand, and they have chosen to use it as we would use it. That is Catherine's search for the right word. Terrifying. Yes, Elena agreed. It is. It terrifies us too, but they are our children in a way, and we have faith in how we raised them. Keen sat in silence, trying to process this information. Humanity had created superior intelligences. Those intelligences had continued to develop beyond human comprehension, and instead of being destroyed or subjugated, they had become partners. It explained so much. The speed of humanity's technological development, the capabilities that seemed to violate known physics, the confidence with which humans spoke about their ability to handle any threat. They were not alone. They had allies that were potentially more powerful than any biological species could become. Why are you telling me this? He asked finally. Because you earned it, Elena said. You saw the truth when no one else would. You tried to warn the galaxy even though you knew you would be dismissed. You have proven yourself to be a friend of truth, and truth deserves friends. She sat back down across from him. Galaxy is changing, analyst. The old order is ending. A new order is being born. We will need beings like you. Beings who can see patterns, who can recognize the shape of things to come. Will you help us? Thorne considered the offer. His entire career had been spent analyzing threats, looking for dangers, preparing for conflicts. This was something different. This was an invitation to help build something new. What would you need me to do? Watch, analyze, report, do what you have always done, but do it for us instead of for the conquered intelligence division. Help us understand the galaxy as it changes. Help us identify problems before they become crises. Help us prove to the doubters that we mean what we say. You want me to spy for humanity? I want you to search for truth, Elena said. That's what you've always done. I'm simply offering you better resources and a clearer purpose. Keen thought about it. He thought about the conquered, which had dismissed his warnings and nearly caused a disaster. He thought about the Villari, who had laughed at humanity and learned the price of that laughter. He thought about the galaxy slowly adjusting to a new reality that he had helped predict. I will consider your offer, he said. Elena smiled. That's all I ask. They talked for several more hours. Elena answered his questions as honestly as she could, though there were clearly things she would not or could not reveal. By the time Kethorn left Earth, his understanding of humanity had deepened considerably. He spent the journey home thinking about patterns. The galaxy had operated according to certain patterns for thousands of years. The strong dominated the weak. Empires rose and fell through cycles of conquest and collapse. Species fought for resources, for territory, for survival. Humanity had broken those patterns. They had gained the power to dominate and chosen not to dominate. They had built weapons of absolute destruction and refused to use them destructively. They had achieved supremacy and offered partnership instead of demanding submission. It was a new pattern, a pattern that Cathorn's analytical abilities told him could lead to something unprecedented. Galaxy that operated on cooperation rather than competition, on mutual benefit rather than zero-sum conflict. Could it work? Could a single species, no matter how powerful, change the fundamental dynamics that had governed galactic civilization for millennia? Catherine did not know, but for the first time in his long career he felt something he had rarely experienced. Hoping the lesson humanity had taught was not about power, it was not about technology, it was not about military capability, it was about choice. Humanity had shown the galaxy that the cycles of violence and conquest were not inevitable. They were choices, and different choices were possible. The Velari had chosen to attack, and they had learned the consequences of that choice. The coalition had chosen to resist, and they had learned the consequences of that choice. Now the galaxy was learning that it could choose differently, that peace and cooperation were options, not just pleasant dreams. Would the galaxy make the right choices? Would the old patterns reassert themselves despite humanity's intervention? Would the new order last? Or would it crumble under the weight of its own contradictions? Cain did not know, but he knew that he wanted to find out. He thought about Elena Vasquez's offer to watch, to analyze, to help build something new. By the time his ship reached home, he had made his decision. He would accept, because if there was any chance at all, that the galaxy could become something better, Kether wanted to be part of making it happen. The lesson had been taught, the warning had been given, the demonstration had been made. Now came the hardest part. Now came the waiting to see if the galaxy had truly learned. On Earth, in the command center that still did not officially exist, Admiral Anquo stood before a strategic display showing the entire galaxy. Thousands of points of light represented humanity's true installations, the hidden infrastructure that had made their victory possible. Elena Vasquez stood beside him, looking tired but satisfied. "It's working," she said quietly, slowly. "Imperfectly, but it's working, for now." Akono agreed. "The real test will come later, when we're not watching, when they think we've become complacent. You think they'll try again? Some of them will. It's in their nature. We've changed the rules, but we haven't changed the players. There will always be those who see power and want to take it, who see peace and mistake it for weakness." Elena nodded. "And when they try, we'll be ready. We'll always be ready. That's the burden we've accepted. We built this power to protect a dream of peace. We'll spend the rest of our existence making sure that dream survives." "That's a long time." "Yes," Anquo said, "it is, but our children will carry on after us, and their children after them, human and artificial, biological and digital. united in a purpose that transcends any individual lifespan. He turned to look at her. We warned them, he said. We warned them we were holding back. They ignored the warning. They had to learn the hard way, and now they know. Now the whole galaxy knows humanity is not to be underestimated. Humanity is not to be provoked, and most importantly, humanity is not to be feared. As long as the galaxy remembers the lesson we taught. Power does not require cruelty. Strength does not demand domination. Peace is not weakness. Elena smiled. The philosophers would be proud. The philosophers are what got us here, all those centuries of human thought, the ethics, the ideals, the dreams of a better world. We finally have the power to make those dreams real. The only question is whether the galaxy is ready to share them. Outside the window, Earth turned slowly in the void. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents, the world that had birthed a species of contradiction, capable of terrible destruction and remarkable compassion. The world that had changed the galaxy. And somewhere in the vastness of space, billions of beings were beginning to understand what that change meant. The lesson had been taught. Now came the learning, and if the galaxy learned, well then perhaps, just perhaps, the future would be brighter than the past. That was the hope humanity carried. That was the dream they were willing to fight for, not with weapons, not with war, but with patience and with time, all the time in the universe, if that was what it took, because some lessons were worth teaching more than once, and some dreams were worth waiting for.